What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton, in full classification of the 2025 Monza Grand Prix, managed to do something that Ferrari's engineers did not even believe possible? What if a revealed telemetry in secret showed that his car was more stable than that of Verstappen? Is it possible that Ferrari has broken the code of your car just in the fastest circuit in the world? Monza, the Temple of Speed, not only represents one of the most iconic scenarios of the Formula One calendar for Ferrari is something deeper, a matter of national pride, historical tradition, and an opportunity to redeem himself in front of his people. And in 2025, that emotional burden was even more intense, because they came home with more doubts than certainties, dragging the sequels of a first half of the season marked by the inconsistency and the bewilderment that generated the adaptation of Lewis Hamilton to the Red Project. On more than one occasion, he showed in interviews that the adaptation process was being more difficult than expected. The driving style that had polished for a decade in Mercedes did not end up synchronizing with the philosophy of the Italian car. Changing equipment not only involved new colors. It meant unlearning, releasing, and adjusting every small habit. Even its relationship with engineers required reinvention. The references he used to attack the curves, the feeling with the brakes, the timing in the heat of the rubber, everything had to be modified. And in the midst of that context, Monza arrived. Hamilton, who until then had maintained a prudent attitude regarding his adaptation, seemed to transform himself into Monza. From the first training session, his name appeared at the top of the timetable. Not as a coincidence, but as a declaration of intentions. He nailed a 1:20,117 in the FP1, leading the batch with an authority that was not seen since his best years with Mercedes. It was faster than Charles Leclerc, faster than Red Bull, faster than McLaren. And that return was only the first sign that something different was happening. The paddock took note. Ferrari engineers too. But beyond the times, the truly shocking would come later, when they began to analyze the data in depth. It wasn't just a matter of pure speed. It was something that until that moment seemed unattainable. Hamilton had found balance. He had operated a car that until then was unpredictable. And it was there, in the halls of the Ferrari motorhome, where a new narrative began to take shape. That of a pilot who, far from being in decline, was rewriting his story in Formula One. That of a team that, despite doubts and criticism, continued to have the ability to reinvent himself. And most importantly, that of a weekend that was about to reveal one of the most shocking data of the season. Monza, as so many times in Ferrari's history, was not just one more race. It was the definitive testing field. And what was to come was completely changing the perception of SF25 and Hamilton himself inside the grille. In Formula One, the results do not always reflect reality. What we see in the timetable is often only the tip of the iceberg. And Hamilton's case in Monza 2025 is the perfect example. Fifth in classification, penalized to the 10th grille. For many, a discrete result. For those who look only the number. But when Ferrari engineers opened the telemetric data of that fast return, they realized that they were facing something completely different. The Lewis classification return was one of those that the teams analyze in slow motion, subway by subway, to look for answers. And in that detailed review, the graphics began to show unusual patterns. First, longitudinal stability reading. Perfectly linear, without oscillations, without braking tensile losses. Then, lateral acceleration analysis in rapid curves. Surprisingly constant, without sudden variations. Something that had not happened in any other session of the year with SF25. But the real finding was at a specific point of the layout, Lesso 2. This curve, half-high speed, had always been torture for the Ferrari. Unstable, with a tendency to survive at the exit. Neither pilots managed to keep record there. Until Monza. Even Hamilton. The sensors recorded a clean traction, a passage through aggressive curve, and most importantly, a more stable and fast exit than that of the Red Bull of Verstappen. That only data unleashed a technical frenzy within the box. For the first time throughout the season, Ferrari not only matched its maximum rival in a critical curve. I overcame it. And it was not a miraculous return. Telemetry showed something even more valuable: consistency. The deltas by sector remained almost identical between each attempt. There was no abrupt degradation or performance fall after the first round thrown. The low extreme aerodynamic load configuration, which many believed a risk, had worked. The car behaved as if it had been designed exclusively for that moment. On a technical level, this was a silent revolution. The data confirmed that Hamilton had executed the return with surgical precision, modulating the brake in each loading zone to maintain the center of gravity under control, using the Ferrari engine torque progressively to avoid overcoming peaks. and drawing perfect lines with error margins of just millimeters. Each phase of the turn was optimized. In the Biasono curve, the peak speed recorded by the SF25 exceeded 353 km per hour, and the telemetry showed that Hamilton kept the accelerator thoroughly for longer than any other pilot in the Q3, including the McLaren and Mercedes. This, apparently lower detail, revealed absolute confidence in the car. And in Formula One, that is not bought or invented. It is built. The gearbox also showed unexpected behavior. The mapping selected by Hamilton and its engineer allowed further transitions in third and fourth crucial march at partial traction points, reducing the ERS lag and improving the efficiency in power delivery. In simple words, every time Hamilton asked for power, the car responded without delay. Something that until that weekend had been a chronic problem in SF25. And perhaps the most revealing data was the analysis of electronic differential. Ferrari had tried a new calibration for Monza, one that offered greater opening at curve entrance and greater blocking. An aggressive configuration, designed for pilots who know how to control a nervous car. And it was Hamilton who chose it. It was his feedback that allowed to refine that solution during the free. And it was its perfect execution that made this adjustment not only work, but completely changed the nature of the car. The conclusion was inescapable. What Hamilton had achieved in Monza went far beyond a good result. He had tamed a car that, until then, behaved like an uncontrollable beast. He had turned it into a precise tool, capable of challenging the championship giants in their stronger field, pure classification. Ferrari, for the first time throughout the year, had a competitive car in Monza. But more importantly, he had a pilot capable of understanding it at a level that no one else had reached. And that symbiosis, so difficult to achieve in Formula One, is what made everyone from the strategists to the technical directors began to ask in silence. What if this was no exception? What if we have just seen Ferrari's real turning point in 2025? That bias made when Hamilton led the first practice in Monza, it was taken as an anomaly. A quick lap with little fuel, perhaps with an aggressive motor map, or simply a track that had evolved more for him. No one thought it was real. No one imagined that behind that time there was a totally different configuration, a transformed car and a pilot who had managed to dominate him as no one had done it throughout the year. Even during the classification, when it marked an impressive 19,124, there was more talk about its grille penalty than the data itself. The fifth place seemed uncomfortable compared to the McLaren or the Mercedes. But there was the error. The result was looked at, not the execution. But the data were there. In acceleration maps, in traction patterns, in the temperature records of the rear tires, which showed for the first time a perfectly linear degradation throughout the session. Even active suspension sensors showed an almost identical reading between the lap and return, a sign of a completely balanced car. It was obvious for those who knew how to search. But nobody did. The camouflage was also strategic. Ferrari hid its aerodynamic modifications after ambiguous technical language in the conferences. There were no grandiloquent communications or promises of miracles. Only silent work. There was no talk of the modified beam wing, or the new refrigeration system, or the ground redesign. The only thing they allowed to see was a photo from the pit lane, taken from a carefully chosen angle to not show what they were really doing. The specialized press, for the most part, fell into the trap. They preferred to talk about the environment in the paddock or the supposed conflict with the development of the 2026 car, instead of doing what really matters, studying the return by return, reading the data, analyzing the delta by sector, and comparing the virtual trajectories with Friday's car in front of Saturday. No one took the time. No one saw it. And that is what makes this moment in Monza so fascinating. Because Ferrari, for once, played to be the silent predator. They hid in the shadow of their unstable reputation, used media wear and tear in their favor, and let everyone underestimate their potential. They knew that nobody had them on the radar. And that gave them freedom to risk. Because it was not only a good classification or a decent result at home. It was much deeper. It was a transformation sample of evolution. Fine adjustment between man and machine that, after months of work, frustrations, and learning, finally found a balance point. And at that moment, in that return launched, Hamilton's past and Ferrari's future met in a single perfectly drawn data line. And now that legend has a new chapter to write. With a new protagonist. And with a new silent warning to the rest of the grill. Ferrari has aroused. Hamilton is ready. And the legacy is not finishing. It is starting. The real question is, will this be the first link in a chain that leads us to see something that seemed impossible? Will we see Hamilton on the podium in Monza dressed in red? Time will say it. But one thing is safe, The starting point already has a name. His name is Monza.